Tonight, a Democratic congressman who served on both President Clinton's and Obama's national security teams, he'll join us. New Jersey Congressman Tom Malinowski, he'll discuss Ukraine, impeachment, and more. Also, how concerned are Republicans and the president in the wake of Tuesday night's results? Well, a top political strategist, he'll join us to discuss and debate. Then, a father who lost his son in the Parkland school shootings, he'll join RFL to discuss something particularly troubling that the NRA is doing. I'm talking about auctioning off guns in schools. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French, and thank you for joining us this Thursday evening. Now, we are learning much more about the impeachment inquiry as well as the timeline. House Democrats reportedly trying to fast-track the process so they can hold a final vote by Christmas, and that means the President of the United States could actually be impeached before the end of this calendar year. Now, we already know the first round of public hearings, they'll start next week. And on Wednesday, we will hear from State Department official George Kent and acting ambassador to Ukraine, Bill Taylor. Then, next Friday, former ambassador to Ukraine, Maria Yovanovitch, she will testify as well. She, a career diplomat who was shown the door after the scandal blew up. She testified that Rudy Giuliani and his allies wanted her out, and Mike Pompeo and others didn't have her back and allowed it all to go down. Plus, the testimony of George Kent, it has just been released, the transcript that is, to the public, and he is also confirming the quid pro quo with Ukraine. Kent said, and I quote now, "I wrote a note to the file saying that I had concerns that there was an effort to initiate politically motivated prosecutions that were injurious to the rule of law, both in Ukraine and the United States." Kent also saying that Trump wanted nothing less than the Ukrainian president to go to a microphone to say they were investigating Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton. Kent also testified that Rudy Giuliani had carried out a, quote, campaign of lies against Maria Yovanovitch that helped lead to her outing. Now, we could also hear from John Bolton, it turns out. The Washington Post now saying the former national security advisor is willing to testify in public, but only after a federal court clears the way. Bolton, he would be defying the White House as the president does not want him to appear. Bolton likely has an axe to grind because Trump fired him, and also Bolton described the Ukrainian situation to a, quote, he compared it to a drug deal that he didn't want to have anything to do with. But we will not hear from Bolton until a court case between the administration and Congress is resolved. That could take weeks, if not even months. But today, a key witness giving a major deposition behind closed doors. Jennifer Williams, a top aide to Vice President Mike Pence, and she was on the infamous July 25th call between President Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart. Williams, she the first person on Pence's staff to testify. We aren't getting details about her testimony, nothing leaking out. We will keep you posted. Reportedly, there was, she said, though, evidence of at least a conversation of giving to getting. In the middle of all this, we're also learning that President Trump wanted his own Attorney General, William Barr, to hold a press conference to say there was nothing to see here. Washington Post, the first to report that Trump, he wanted Barr to hold a press conference to announce the president didn't do anything wrong with Ukraine. Interestingly, Barr declined. For what it's worth, the president, he's denying that this happened, calling it all fake news. To be charitable, we've heard him say these things before. Then there is the whistleblower who started this whole thing by reporting his concerns through the proper channels. For weeks, President Trump and his allies, they've been pushing for the guy to be outed and identified. Right-wing and fringe media groups, they've now published his name, and so has the Russian state media. Think about the company these folks are keeping. Donald Trump Jr., not as a shocker to anyone, he's decided he'll get involved. He also helping out, now tweeting an article identifying the alleged, and there's a key word, alleged whistleblower who followed all the proper protocols, went through the proper channels in issuing his complaint, and now Trump Jr. and the fringe have decided they will subvert both protections, put this person in danger, and release his name again with no corroboration. Now, we're not going to name the alleged whistleblower. Major networks, cable news channels, including Fox, and the major dailies also not naming him as well. He's already risked his career and even safety to come forward, so the last thing I'm going to do here is make things worse for the Patriot. Of course, Donnie Jr., not concerned with any of that. Joining us now to discuss all of that and more, Democratic New Jersey Congressman Tom Malinowski. He's the perfect person to talk to this about. He served on the Foreign Affairs Committee, and he was also on President Clinton's National Security Council. After that, he was Assistant Secretary of State in the Obama administration. The nation's going to be glued next week to the public hearings, and at least from what I'm hearing, there is, and I've heard this from both Republicans and Democrats on the Hill, apparently the closed-door testimony of some of the folks we'll hear from, but particularly Ambassador Taylor, extremely powerful, that he'll come across, they believe, on live TV as an unimpeachable witness with not an agenda, but a patriot rather than a partisan. And conversely, it's causing some real concerns from the president's defenders that it will not put the president in a good light. You've been involved with some of the depositions, and as I mentioned from your prior life before a congressman, some of these diplomats you even know on a personal level. Is at least the clue here as to what we'll hear next week from some of these folks? Are we on the right path that they're going to probably acquit themselves very well?
I believe so. I spent hours with these witnesses in the deposition phase that we are completing now. And it's not just Ambassador Taylor, it's not just Ambassador Yovanovitch, our two ambassadors to Ukraine. It is a whole lineup of national security officials who worked for President Trump, who all tell exactly the same story, that we had an excellent policy towards Ukraine. We were helping this country defend itself against Russia. And then Trump came along with Rudy Giuliani and torpedoed the whole thing to try to get a personal political favor from the Ukrainians, namely announcing an investigation into Joe Biden.
You know, we've opened up our phone lines in this program quite a bit in addition to talking to folks on both sides of the aisle. And I want you to respond to one of the refrains that I get from folks who say, well, it was just a phone call, or at the end of the day, Ukraine still got the money. Basically, no harm, no foul. The president maybe didn't use the right optics, but there was no damage at the end of the day. How do you respond to that?
It wasn't just a phone call. It was an effort that unfolded over several months. And they did cut the aid. They did stop the aid that we were sending to Ukraine. That aid was about 10% of Ukraine's military budget at a time when Russian tanks, Russian troops are battling Ukrainian soldiers on Ukrainian soil. People died as a result of this. And America's word, our good word, was sullied once again in front of our allies. There was a lot of damage done, which is why, again, every single official in the Trump administration who was working on this policy desperately tried to get the president to reverse himself. And in the end, he did, because of pressure from Republicans and Democrats in Congress, because the whistleblower complaint was made public. But in those ensuing several months, a lot of harm was done.
This is not just the president and Rudy Giuliani. To me, Congressman, a notable thread in this story is it seems by all credible, rational information, the vice president had to know, given how involved his surrogates were. Mike Pompeo had to know what was going on. Either he's lying, or certainly some of the testimony under oath is lying, that he told Pompeo up to 3 times about what was going on. This goes beyond just one person and his personal attorney, doesn't it?
Yeah, a lot of people knew about it, but you know what? Again, all these people actually disagreed with President Trump. They, in their own ways, they all tried to persuade him to cut this out and to release the aid. I'm not a big fan of Mike Pompeo or Mike Pence, but this was something that one person is responsible for, and that is President Donald Trump. Everybody else in the administration and a bipartisan majority in Congress wanted to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia, build a democracy. One man, President Trump, because he didn't care about our national security, all he wanted was personal political favors for the 2020 election, torpedoed the whole policy, held our national security hostage for a personal political favor. That's what we are looking into here today.
I mentioned before off the top, you have a background, a lot of background as it relates with both the State Department and foreign policy. What Pompeo did, or more specifically didn't do, where he left Ambassador Yovanovitch just twisting in the wind on this. We're seeing now Donald Trump Jr. outing the name of the alleged whistleblower. I got to imagine for folks on the front lines in both intelligence and also in our diplomatic corps, they feel that they're fighting with no support, and in fact they have almost an enemy in the administration for trying to carry out America's interests.
They have an enemy in the president. You know, if you work in the CIA today, if you work in the FBI, if you work at the State Department, you know the President of the United States does not have your back. I've never ever said that before. Republican presidents, Democratic presidents, different policies, but they've always had the back of the people who risk their lives to protect us, and that has changed, and it makes me absolutely sick. And you know what? This is why we have to do what we're doing right now. I didn't go to Congress to work on the impeachment of the president. I went to Congress to stand up for what we need here in New Jersey, but I took an oath to protect the Constitution. All these people took an oath to protect the Constitution. We've got to stand by each other and make sure we have leadership that puts the country's interest first.
What are Republicans saying that we're not hearing behind closed doors? I've heard some of your colleagues in the Senate that said, hey, if they could cast a vote anonymously and not attach their name, there'd be as many as 30 to 35 senators here who'd vote to remove this president. What do you hear when the cameras aren't on from Republicans? Do they feel that what the president did here was impeachable? How much do politics in next year's elections cloud all this?
You know, they don't all agree with one another, but there are Republicans I've spoken to who privately tell me that they're very disturbed by what the president has done, and they don't quite know how to defend him. We'll see how they vote. It's not an easy thing to vote to impeach a president of your own party. And, you know, they're worried, some of them, about losing their seats if the president issues a tweet against them. But privately, you know, it's just impossible to defend this conduct in any rational way, especially if you're a Republican who really cares about the national security of our country. So we'll see what they do. We will give them an opportunity with these public hearings to make up their minds.
Congressman Malinowski, I wish you the best of luck next week here. It will be an eventful one in American history, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All right, everyone, when we come back, believe it or not, we are less than a year out from Election Day, and it will be a seismically important one at that. There's a lot of potentially bad news on the horizon for the president. We're going to take a look at where we stand and what we learned from Election Night this past Tuesday.